Imagine you're 20 years old, and all of a sudden, you're living a life that most people can only dream about. We're talking private jets, custom Lamborghinis, parties where the bill for a single night could literally buy a house. Well, for a young man from Singapore named Malone Lam, this was reality. But here's the thing. This incredible fortune wasn't won in a lottery, and it definitely wasn't inherited. It was taken.
So, let's start with this number, $569,528.39. Now that is not the price of a mansion. That's what Malone Lam allegedly spent in one single night at a club in Los Angeles. And that was just one receipt in this absolute whirlwind spending spree that made him an overnight celebrity and, you guessed it, a prime target for investigators.
Okay, so we have to dive into this because the source of all this wealth was, and I'm quoting U.S. prosecutors here, one of the largest cryptocurrency thefts from a private individual in the history of the United States. So yeah, we are talking about a crime on a truly historic scale. Which of course leads us to the big question. How in the world did a 20-year-old school dropout from Singapore allegedly pull off a $250 million digital heist against a really seasoned crypto investor? You know, the answer is somehow both simpler and way more terrifying than you might think.
So, the crime itself was just staggering. In August of 2024, 4,100 Bitcoin, worth over $230 million at the time, they just, poof, vanished.
And you have to understand, the victim here wasn't some crypto novice. Nope, we're talking about a long-time investor whose funds were stored in what everyone considered a highly secure wallet. This was not a simple case of leaving your password on a sticky note. So, how'd they get in?
Well, the answer gets right to the core of this whole heist. It wasn't a technical attack that broke through digital walls. It was a psychological one. It was the perfect social hack. Now, for anyone who's not familiar, social engineering is basically the art of manipulating people, so they give up confidential info. It doesn't exploit bugs in software, it exploits bugs in human nature. You know, our trust, our fear, our desire to be helpful.
So let's just break that down for a second. A technical hack is all about breaking code. A social hack, that's about breaking trust. See, the hackers didn't target the victim's computer, they targeted the victim himself.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of how they did this. It basically unfolded in 4 key steps. First, they impersonated support staff from both Google and the crypto exchange Gemini, which created this false sense of security. Second, they created this massive sense of urgency, warning the victim about a totally fake hack attempt to get him to panic. Third, they tricked him into installing AnyDesk, which is a remote access software, giving them complete control of his computer. And finally, while one of the accomplices kept the victim distracted on the phone, another one scoured his private files, found the keys to his crypto wallet, and just like that, transferred out all 4,100 Bitcoin. It was a perfectly coordinated psychological attack.
Now, Lam wasn't working alone, no way. This was a coordinated effort by a whole digital crime ring. Lam, supposedly the mastermind, went by the alias Greaves. His key accomplice, a guy named Jean D.L. Serrano, or Versace God, he handled the technical side. Another, Veer Shital, known as Wiz, was a specialist in digital manipulation. And eventually, a much wider indictment would name a whole ring of 13 people.
But just as quickly as their criminal empire shot up, it all came crashing down. And the reason they got caught was the very thing the crime was all about. The greed, the crazy spending, the impossible-to-ignore lifestyle.
I mean, just look at this timeline. The heist happens in August 2024, the wild, very public spending spree kicks off immediately, and by mid-September, they're arrested. The whole thing, from the actual theft to getting captured, took less than a month. It's really a masterclass in recklessness.
And their recklessness was on full display. That $500,000 nightclub bill, a mansion in Miami rented for $68,000 a month, a watch purchased for $2 million, and on top of all that, court documents allege they bought over 30 luxury cars. They weren't trying to hide, they were practically begging to be found. But here's the real twist. Despite pulling off this incredibly sophisticated psychological scam, the group made some unbelievably basic mistakes when it came to covering their digital tracks. Their operational security was, frankly, a total mess. So these were the specific mistakes that led investigators right to their front door. They reused crypto deposit addresses, which created a crystal-clear link between transactions. Serrano, Versace God, created an account on an exchange without even using a VPN, exposing his home IP address in California.
and Wiz even accidentally revealed his full name during a screen recording. I mean, they essentially signed their names to the crime. So, this trail of digital breadcrumbs led the FBI directly to Lamb's Miami mansion, and that's when the reckoning began.
Lamb, Serrano, and 11 others were charged under the RICO Act, which is a law typically reserved for taking down organized crime syndicates, like the mafia. This was actually the first Bitcoin-related RICO case in history. Lamb, the alleged mastermind, has pleaded not guilty, and his trial is set for this October.
And the stakes here could not be higher. For each charge, Lamb is facing up to 20 years in federal prison. A life of luxury that was bought with stolen crypto could very well end with decades behind bars.
So what happened to that $250 million? Well, about $70 million has been seized or frozen by authorities. Millions more were just burned on cars, jets, and parties. That money is gone forever. But that still leaves over $100 million completely unaccounted for, just lost in the crypto ether and likely never to be seen again.
You know, this whole saga leaves us with a really critical question for our digital age. In a world where fortunes are literally made of code, is it possible that our greatest vulnerability isn't in that code, but actually in ourselves?